We are live. Welcome to the Leadership Launchpad Project. I'm Rob Kalwarowsky, and as always, the yang to my yin, but wearing her librarian glasses today, Susan Hobson. Susan, how are you?
How did I knew you were going to call that out? Oh my gosh. Granny got some glasses. I feel like I hit 40 and all of a sudden things are changing. And one of the first places I noticed that was in my vision. So yeah, I'm fired up. I'm excited to be here. So yeah, let's get this party started.
Absolutely. And as always, we have to start off with a quote. And so I have one here from Richard Rudd, and the quote comes from his book, Gene Keys. And he says, "To fully commit is to abolish half-heartedness and go all in, whether it be to a relationship, a project, a mission, a philosophy, or a way of life."
Yes, I love it. All in, fully engaged, pot committed. That's our style of leadership too. So I see why you chose that quote this morning.
Absolutely. It's our style of leadership, and it's where we are at both, in the podcast and in all the work that we do. And another person who's all in their journey is our guest today, our special guest, David Irvine. He calls himself the Leaders Navigator, and he's the author of The Other Everest, Navigating the Pathway to Authentic Leadership. And a fellow Albertan, David, how are you?
I am excellent. It is a pleasure to be with you both today. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you. And I guess first off, how much snow did you get?
Oh, no.
I think we're about the same as Edmonton. I think we had about a foot here.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I think you got a touch
I'm in the
more
foot.
than
We're
we
west
did.
of Calgary. So how about the same for you?
I think we got somewhere in the 4 to 6 inch range. So not as much as that, but it was not good.
And so it begins.
It is November in Canada after all, though. You have to.
It was literally November 1st it started.
Like clockwork.
Yeah.
David, help our audience understand a little bit about yourself, what mission you're on in the world, and what brought you to this mission?
Well, it's a bit of a backstory. Thanks for having me again. So I've been in the leadership development field now for 35 years. Started off as a family therapist. Very interesting when you're a family therapist, nobody ever brings in their good kids, right? So all you see are people with pain. And by the time they end up in a therapist's office, I was thinking it was like putting Band-Aids on an artery wound. So I thought there's got to be a better way to do this. So I started to do talks back in the 80s for parents on raising accountable kids, and ended up getting business executives coming to my parenting talks.
Wow.
And saying, you should come and talk to our company about this. And I had no clue what I was doing in those days. It was called consulting, right? So I'd go into these companies and I said, what do you want me to talk about? Do you want me to just talk about parenting? And they should just take the word family and adapt it to the word company and tell our company how to build accountability. So
I don't know if that's a good thing if they use their people as children or what, but
but there's some very commonality between families and organizations.
Oh yeah.
But something in me woke up and said, this is what the work that I need to be doing. So just out of word of mouth, I gave up my family therapy practice. Got so busy working with companies. I was in Lethbridge at the time, Southern Alberta here, and moved our family to Calgary. Went into business. Found two guys. Went into business. We wrote a book back in the 90s on accountability. And that's really what took my career off. We traveled around the world. We took our book to Russia. Our big claim to fame is we sold 80,000 copies to Lukoil of our accountability book. And if you were in Calgary in the 90s, you'd have used any of the top 10 oil companies in Calgary used our accountability book. But what happened was that it became very transactional to me. So we were teaching these companies how to build accountability. And I still a love for me. It's taking what I learned about families and adapting it into companies. Talk about how to build. It was my philosophy. It was their tool. These guys were in the oil patch for probably 40 years collectively. So they really helped me understand the business. But something was missing. So it became so transactional. So I started to do some research in the early 2000s. I always used to think you had to know something to write a book about it. What I've discovered is if you want to learn something, write a book about it. That's been my development tool. So I said, I want to learn about what's missing. So we researched probably 4,000 people, we asked them one question: what do you want from your leaders? And what it essentially could be boiled down to was, we want our leaders to get past the fads and the gimmicks and the flavors of the month. We just want our leaders to be real. So I started to write a book about real leadership. And what I discovered is, before you can be a real leader, you first of all have to be a real human being. And that's what I've been researching and teaching in the last 20 years, is taking and integrating the philosophy of authenticity with being accountable. So you integrate accountability with authenticity. And accountability without authenticity is drudgery, but authenticity without accountability is fantasy. So you just, when you put them together, you get destiny. So that's been my work, is helping people find their voice and amplify their impact by connecting to their authentic self more fully.
I love that. And David, I know we spoke about it when we touched base, but can you tell the folks out there your leadership journey and how you were able to arrive at your authentic self?
Yeah, so one of the things that I have found is that we all have some defining moments in our life that have made us who we are. My whole premise around authenticity, let me just get an ounce of theory here, and then I'll share my own journey. We are all born authentic. We're not born accountable. You have to learn to be accountable, but authenticity is the essence of who the essence is when we are born. Anybody that's been around more than one child in a family understands right from day one, they have a different essence. And what happens is that we grow up in this world that tells us how we should be. Frankly, it's easier to raise kids when they're obedient than it is to be authentic. So what we do is that we teach kids, in order to feel safe, they have to suppress their authentic self and conform to the world. And what happens is that when we distance ourselves from our authentic self, that's what I call stress in life. And so what returning to your authentic self is to begin to understand what were the defining moments in your life that at the time were an impossibility, and the hell that you went through in those moments were actually invitations to you to go back, to return to your authentic self. And then if you can if you can connect with your authentic self, then what you can do is create an environment where people can then be authentic, and you'll never have to motivate people again once you connect with your authentic self. We just don't have the muscles to know how. We don't have the skills at knowing how to do that for ourselves, much less for our teams. So that's the work that I'm doing. So in my work, I've had a few defining moments in my life. One of the significant moments was just coming to grips with depression. So I had two major episodes with clinical depression that wiped me out for 2 weeks. And I was just in a fetal position and could not move. And I had to go back and really face my life. And the harder that my wife tried to help me with this, the worse it got. Help just wasn't helpful. And the best thing that she did in the mid-90s, when she came to me, put her arms around me and said, I cannot any longer be around you when you're depressed. I love you too much. We have to leave. And she took the kids and she walked out. Now, that was a beginning turning point for me to say, I need to go and get help from this. And I need to get into a program. I walked through the path of addiction, and I began to face who I really was, that I was presenting this persona. In fact, I could even talk about authenticity in the world. I could talk about accountability in the world, and I made good money doing it, but there was something incongruent with my own life. And it wasn't until I took this personal journey, what I have come to know as the journey to the Other Everest. You know, we all know about climbing the big one, but there's this Mariana Trench that's 8,000 meters plus below the sea level that is equally treacherous as the journey upward. And we have a society that says that success is about height, which is all fine, but success isn't just about height. It's also about depth. And so the depth of going through my own hell and coming through it, what I began to realize in facing that and creating a community and a program around that to help me with that on a daily basis actually enabled me to do the work that I'm doing, because I could not do this work had I not gone to those kind of dark places in my life. I couldn't be able to connect with people in the way that I'm able to now. But I have to work with it every day. I don't think there's a cure for depression. Now, depression is, I don't want to be prescriptive here. It's different for everybody. But from my experience, it's a biological, my dad suffered depression. He was in and out of psychiatric hospitals. There's a physical component to it. There's a mental component to it, how we work our mind. And there's a spiritual component to it. Depression will raise its head for me today when I'm living inauthentically, when I'm being too accountable to the world's demands and not enough attention to my own soul's desire. And whenever that gets out of balance, depression will be my guide. That's the voice of my soul that will surface. I was told by a doctor once that the key to a long and happy life is to get diagnosed with a chronic life-threatening illness and have to take care of it every day of your life. And that's what I've had to do with my own well-being, is that I've had to attend to this every day, which has actually made me a healthier, stronger, more clearer person in my work and in my life.
Wow. I totally resonate with your story so much, and I know Rob does too. I actually came to this work because I got diagnosed with a life-threatening disease. It's the only way I joke and say I had to be in the chokehold on the mat before I tapped out and finally started awakening to my untapped potential, and doing the work in order to do so. And yeah, that journey was a return to self, right? In terms of my unconditioned self. My question for you, David, is how do we get people to come to this table upstream before they have to get in the chokehold, right? To the mat. We always say, it's one of our biggest things that we're trying to figure out here on our mission, right? It seems to be the brick walls and the glass ceilings that compel the high achieving leader to actually come to this table. But we're trying to figure out, how do we get to them upstream and motivate them to want to go on this journey before they actually have to experience that level of pain and suffering?
I asked myself, Susan, the same question. It's a beautiful question. I think it does seem to be human nature that pain is the most compelling motive to change. And until we're enough pain, we tend to just get by. And so pain certainly has been, for me, the driving force. But I also think when I plant seeds in a presentation, when we do a podcast like this, you must find this, that we can plant some seeds with somebody that can recognize, you know what, I've been lying in bed in this 3:00 in the morning conversation, dark ceiling conversation with myself. I just haven't been able to put words to it. And you help me clarify, I need to make some changes in my life. The other thing that you can begin to do is just slow down. We're so bloody busy today. We wake up with a device on our bedside table. We engage in the world before we're even out of bed. We get bombarded with social media. We get bombarded with the news. We get bombarded with the demands in our emails and our text machines. And we have no moment to listen to our own inner voice. So if you begin to just slow down and pay attention to some kind of a niggling inside of us, that voice that we were not taught to connect with as children, it's in there in all of us, but we just are not trained at listening to it. And if we can begin to listen to it, maybe we won't have to go through the suffering to get there. That's my dream.
I love that.
It's a loud voice too.
Say that again, Rob.
It's a loud voice too.
Well, it is for you, but it is a loud voice. But
it's practice.
Think of the volume of voices that come at us that suffocate that we don't even realize that it's a loud voice. The fact that you would call it a loud voice would say I'd love to hear how you are attentive to enough in your own life to know that that's a loud voice. Because it is actually loud if we listen.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the work, right? And our journeys, obviously, because we spoke about it before, but our journeys are very similar. Basically, I suffered with depression since 2013. Had a suicide attempt, didn't find the help I needed in terms of therapy and medication, sort of quit looking for help. Then when I walked into Susan's door, it opened up again, and that was a whole other thing of help and finding the right pieces, which really came together for me probably about a year and a half ago. And yeah, it's still obviously a work in progress, like the medication switches and all the stuff. But even Wednesday, what I realized was that a thing that I needed to do was to deliberately schedule like Winston and me time. So Winston's my dog. But to schedule that time, because Tuesday I did 5 hours of Zooms in a row. Then I went to the gym, then I went to the store, then I got home and I was like, and it was like really bad for me. Where Wednesday I did, I think it was 3 hours of Zooms and I had 30-minute break. And all I did was like pet my dog for that 30 minutes. And then I was like, felt so much better. And so, yeah, it's like deliberate stuff like that, which was like loud because like when I closed my eyes and did my visualization, it was like yelling at me. And so, but it does take the practice. Like that's been like that voice really, like Susan and I started working on that about 3 years ago. And then I did it in therapy and the other stuff. So it takes time to get there, but it's loud and it's obvious.
Well, we're talking the same language, but I love this notion of developing a practice, being intentional. Yeah. And authentic leaders have some kind of daily practice that connects them to that inner voice, because it takes practice, literally,
absolutely,
to listen to that voice, because we're so conditioned to hear all the other voices that are so easy. But what we're talking about here is that intentional voice of going inside. And I'll tell you, dogs are a good pathway, right? Spending time in nature, having a meditation practice, maybe it's a prayer practice, whatever it is, but we got to slow down. Everywhere we go today, you get asked, how are you? What's the first word that comes to? I'm busy.
Good.
Everybody's busy. It's like a badge of honor. The worst thing you can do is to go to a party and say, how are you? I'm not very busy. What's wrong with you? So
true.
The next question, here's an authentic response to busyness. Next time somebody tells you you're busy, here's the question to ask them. Is it a good busy? The only way you can answer that, the world will not give you an answer to that question. You have to look inside. You have to ask, is this a good busy? There's an, it's like good tired and bad tired. And we all get tired, but is it authentic tired, or is it living inauthentically? I don't care how many trips you take to Hawaii, you will never recover from bad tired. If your life is misaligned with your soul's calling, I don't care how busy you are going to get burned out. Burnout, folks, is not about hard work. It's about heartache. It's about being busy to the extent that you lose connection with your own voice. I know I'm talking to the converted here because this is your work.
Yeah, I love it. I want you to keep on talking about this, because I think another question that I really struggle with, right, is this, like, with all the pressure of, the pandemic that our leaders just navigated, and now all the economic pressure of the markets crashing, it's like, how do we convince a leader right now that this is requisite, right? Because, a leader has so much pressure coming at them at all times from the outside. So many people that they're responsible for, other people, right? So I just think like that in the work that I do in the chair with leaders is oftentimes the hardest part, right? Is like just convincing them to prioritize the space to slow down and get quiet and get inwards. So how do you leverage those leaders, and how do you make a case for that, David?
Well, just what we're doing today.
Yeah.
I actually, Susan, don't use the word convince. I don't have anything to convince anybody. I just have a story. I have and I think we're saying the same thing.
Yeah.
But I have, in my lifetime, I'm getting to a stage in my life where, you know what? I'm a farmer. I grew up on a farm. I throw out seeds. That's all I do. Mm-hmm. And I don't know where they're going to take root, but if I tell my story, maybe somebody will resonate with it and want to get on board with me. That has been my marketing strategy. Is I'm about throwing out seeds, and it's about attraction, not promotion. So and by the way, this is my philosophy of a leader. I think if you try to convince people to get on board with you, you're using the wrong instrument. Yeah. What you do is you got to inspire people. You be the light. This is what I have learned from my mentors. You be the light, and people will come from miles to feel the heat of that. And so if it resonates, if it doesn't resonate, you're not quite ready yet. We will all, what I call, hit a red line in our life, where we get so busy trying to meet society's demands that we're going to get a wake-up call. Mm-hmm. If we're meant to take this path. And my job is to be here when people hit that red line. I mean, the red line could be a divorce. I think this whole pandemic has been a wake-up call. We are all in I can't say all, but many of us have been in this authentic, reflective place these last couple of years. It's been a shared wake-up call for all of us to begin to say, what are my values? What's really important in my life? What matters to me? What purpose am I? What meaning? My dad took me for a walk when I was 17 years old, and a wise guy. And he took me up above our barn and put his arm around me. He said, first of all, he says, you got about 4 months before you leave home. Pretty smart guy, my dad was, right? And he said, the conventional thing for me to do is to wish you success. But he said, I'm not going to wish you success in your life, because you'll be successful no matter what you do. What I hope for you is that you live a life of meaning, and that you understand that success and meaning are two different things. Don't confuse it. Don't confuse a standard of living with the quality of life. And I've been on this quest all my life for what does it really mean to have meaning in your life? And you can't get the answer to that question in the world. You can't you get it engaged in the world, but you have to look inside. And so people will come to this when they're ready. And all I'm doing is holding the light out there. And when it begins to resonate, and it doesn't have to resonate fully, there can be just a little inner nudge, right? Mm-hmm. You've discovered this. And if that little door is open, then you can help fuel that. You can open that door with people. But if that readiness not there, I don't sweat it so much. I used to define myself by how well I could convince people and get people on board with this. Maybe it's just age, but I'm just relaxing a little bit more with it, having some fun, doing what we're doing today, having a good conversation, and say, listen, if you want to join us on this journey, it's a heck of a ride.
And I think you're right? Is like, if you bring folks through the door, the work is still incredibly difficult, and it's a journey in itself. And so convincing folks may keep them on that work a little bit, but to actually get to somewhere, I wouldn't even say, obviously, I don't know if you ever get to the bottom of the trench, but even sort of in it a little bit, it takes a lot of, it's not something that's easy to do.
And you said it really well, both of you, that it isn't a destination. It is a method of travel. It's a journey. Mm-hmm. And it isn't like you arrive someplace. Now I'm authentic. We just we just
speak on it.
We continually unpack and unravel the layers, and you just get to know yourself more and more and more. I mean, I came out of this retreat this week. We had 3 days with authentic leaders from across the country in my 3-day fall Authentic Leadership Academy. And I just woke up this morning, just all kinds of insights that I got from the participants. I learned as much as I taught. in terms of what came to me and how I can integrate it into my teaching. And so we just keep learning. And we keep, I always say, if we're struggling with it, that's usually a good indication that we're on this path. Because this struggle between being accountable to what the world wants and being authentic to what our soul desires. And when you can marry those two, that's true, that's really authenticity. But we go back and forth. Because most people listening to this call are probably accountable achievers, right? They know how to show up in the world. They know how to meet the needs of the marketplace. They know how to meet the needs of their customers and their clients. But then they'll wake up like I did one day and say, hey, what about my desires? What do I really want out of my life? What does life want? What's really life asking me? And it's like Joseph Campbell would say, sometimes we have to give up the life we've planned in order to live the life that we're destined to live. But it's a matter of just being present to life to see what you get taught and see where life is guiding you. It has to come from within.
I love this on so many levels. I'm going to share my Forbes article with you that's coming out next week, because it's all about the wake-up call from the redlining pandemic. And it's like, it's all about that, right? Like, we're hoping that people went on that inner journey when they got sent to their bunkers. We're hoping that inner journey has left them in a more aligned space and place in terms of what they truly value, not what the world has convinced them they need to value, right? Because that's really what this purpose-driven mission is all about, right? But I want to ask you this while we have you in studio. Where does our audience begin? If they're hearing us planting these seeds and they're getting that wake-up call now, like what are some great tips that we can give them in terms of where to begin with that inner work in terms of the journey towards authenticity?
Yeah, great question. So first of all, slow down. Create some space in your week. Maybe it's 2 hours on a Sunday morning to buy a nice journal. And just reflect and write what your experience is in the last 7 days. Just create some space and notice how uncomfortable it is to just sit still. No noise, no internet, no cell phones. Turn off the cell phone, unplug, and just sit still and notice what comes up. And practice the ability to just be, right? Spend time in nature. See, whenever we spend time connecting with authenticity, I define authenticity as beauty, truth, and love. Has to meet those criteria. Now, there's a lot of misconceptions about authenticity, which we can get to. But to start with, be around beauty. The things that you hold to be beautiful. Whether it's nature, whether it's a dog. The nice thing, that in nature, there's no straight lines in nature. Everything is imperfect. So be around imperfection. Be around connecting with and spending time with what you call beautiful, what you would call loving, and what you would call truthful. Be around relationships that you can be truthful in. Now, we need to be really clear what truth is, but if we want to go down that path, I can. But be around, hang out in nature, slow down, develop a practice of being still every day. Now, if those things are difficult for you, then, and they are for most of us, then know that a guide is required. We can't, authenticity is a lonely journey, but it can't be done alone. So we need a guide. Therapists, 12-step groups. If you're struggling with an addiction, if you're struggling with something that's making your life unmanageable, get involved. Connect with any of us that are on this call right now. That this is, reach out. We got guides. The three of us are guides in our work that we can reach out to any of us to say, I need some help with this. The hardest thing I ever did in my life, you guys, was to ask for help. to know I can't do this alone. I need it. I need help. And it's the hardest thing for many of us to say, help me. Reach out to a guide, a confidant, a trusted friend. The trouble with a spouse or a significant other in our life, if that's your sole support, what you'll be doing is bringing your mess to your relationship instead of your message. Instead of your best self, you want to have somebody outside of your living and working environment that you can just really lean on and get perspective and get support, and someone that'll help hold you accountable. So it requires, reaching out to a community of having somebody like, I'm 66 years old. How many voices are there in this world that tell me how to be a cool, successful 66-year-old?
Yeah.
Now, how many voices are there that guide me to my own voice? And that's what we're after, is to find a community of people that will guide you to your own voice. And they're out there. And if you start to make that intention clear, these are some of the ways that we can begin to live authentically.
And you mentioned it there a second ago. I just want to go there if I can. The misconceptions in and around authenticity, especially in leadership. Let's go there.
Okay. So we need to be really clear. Remember I said that authenticity is the essence of who we're born with.
Yes.
Now, people walk around being a jerk. And they say, well, that's just my authentic self. Or they have an affair with somebody in the office. And they say, well, my authentic self told me to do this. Well, I'm not going to argue that. But here's the thing that we need to get is we learn to cope and learn to survive in life that is not necessarily authentic. What it is it's a coping response to staying safe. You walking around a jerk, that's not your authentic self. No baby is born a jerk. You learn to be a jerk, and it becomes a coping mechanism. You have learned to make the world safe for you by pushing everybody else away. That's a coping mechanism that's very different than authenticity. Just because I have an impulse doesn't make it authentic. We are not taught to distinguish an emotional impulse. You can come home and say, I feel like having a piece of cake to deal with my bad day. That's not authentic. Babies know what they need. A piece of cake is likely not what you need. Now, you can have a piece of cake. I'm not saying it's wrong, but just don't call that authentic. That's actually a defense against being still enough to find out what went wrong or what went right in the day, what was uncomfortable in the day that would guide you to that authentic self. An addiction will take you away from your authenticity. It's actually a defense against the courage to be authentic. So just because you have an impulse doesn't mean it's authentic. That's a misconception that we have, and that's what's given authenticity such a bad rap these days, because we don't understand. We've mistaken true essence and authenticity with emotions.
I love that. I mean, obviously, I love that. And it's funny, right? Because Dr. Gabor Mate says that addictive people or people with addiction are some of the most honest in the world because they're actually honest with the pain they have inside them and they're doing something about it.
Yes, addicts who are stepping into having the courage to go into recovery. That's where the courage lies. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that really what you're recovering in addiction is you're not just recovering from the addiction, you're actually recovering your authentic self that is trying to be seen and listened to through the addiction. And we mistaken the addictive tendency for authenticity. But actually, if you listen to that, for example, if you want to have a drink in the middle of the afternoon and you're an alcoholic and you really have crossed that line from, nothing wrong with having a drink if you enjoy a drink. But if you are become an alcoholic, then you're not enjoying that drink. You're using that drink. Now, that is actually a desire. What are you really thirsty for? You think it's alcohol, but if you'll listen deeply, and if you have a program that keeps you from drinking, then you'll stop and ask yourself, what am I really thirsty for? I'm thirsty for a connection to my soul. That's why I find recovering addicts are actually, generally speaking, pretty bloody spiritual people.
Oh, so good. I love this, right? And I think it's such an incredible thing, right? And it's funny because like authentic leadership, everyone's talking about it these days, right? And you're right. It's the same thing. Like we had Kim Scott on before, and it's like radical candor. People think being radically candid is just being an asshole. And this is not where we're going with all of this. And so I guess, David, I just want you to sort of illustrate with folks. And I also love the point that you need to slow down. And I do think it's incredibly uncomfortable for us to do at the beginning. But I would love if you could tell us a little bit about truth. Like you mentioned a little bit about the inner truth and who you are. Do you want to talk a little more about that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So let's suppose you're sitting in a meeting. Let's make this real practical. Let's make it real. You're sitting in a meeting and somebody says something and you're thinking to yourself, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Now, if you say, you know what, Susan, that comment you had in that meeting, that's the stupidest thing I ever heard. And and I'm using authenticity as an excuse to crap all over you.
Yeah, exactly.
That's not truthful. See, truth by nature is unarguable. You can't argue with truth. So how do you speak the truth about a comment that you hated? What you do is you look inside and you say, what is my reaction to what they just said? Now, maybe what the reaction is I was hurt. I was offended. I was disrespected. I felt disrespected in that comment you had. That is unarguable. Now, you could potentially defend against it and argue. No, you're not. No, you can't argue with the fact that I'm hurt.
Mm-hmm.
That's truthful. And that and by the way, remember I said it's three things: truth, beauty, and love. So is my intention here to build community, to build caring, to bring compassion here, or is my intention here to destroy? It's not authentic. That's a coping mechanism if it's used to destroy. But if we're truthful, can't argue with that. You can't argue with with truth. Because it's self-evident. So we need to learn how to speak our truth in life. And if we could all learn to speak our truth, it would not lead to violence. It would lead to compassion. This is my path here. That makes sense?
Yeah, so your truth is basically like your authentic reality in terms of how that statement or action impacts you emotionally.
100%. That is by nature what authentic truth is.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to be courageous about speaking our truth.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't have to disrespect somebody by speaking our truth. If I tell you you're a jerk, or if I tell you that's a stupid comment, that's an opinion. There's a big difference between an opinion and truth. And if we own it as an opinion, this is not my truth, but I have an opinion about this.
Mm-hmm.
Then we have an argument. Then we have let's all get together and share our opinions. Fine. Let's call it what it is.
Yeah.
You see, this is what people are seeking from their leaders is truth. Let's tell the truth. The truth is, you know what? I'm a hypocrite. I have these values and I don't live up to them all the time. There's a gap between what I claim here and how we're working in this organization. And you know what I need? I need you to come and tell me when you see the truth of my incongruence, because I'm human. Let's stop pretending that we have to have it all together. It's the conversation. See, people all say, well, the person doesn't walk the talk. Folks, we never walk the talk. We can say we value health, but how many of us live our lives in complete alignment with our value of health? We always are misaligned because we're human. Let's tell the truth about it. And then let's create a space where it's safe to tell the truth. I define psychological safety as telling the truth, if it's truth, is acknowledged, recognized, and rewarded. That's what psychological safety is. So that we feel free to bring that authenticity to our work. That's what's going to bring forward. And that's what people are craving. They want their leaders to just tell the truth. That's what being real is. But in order to do that, you have to feel comfortable enough with yourself to say, I'm human, and this is the truth. And then people will get on board with that. It's compelling to be around truth. That's real. Now, what we say is that's what we want from our leaders, but actually, if what we complain about with our leaders is actually a defense against having the courage to live it ourselves. So let's not project that onto our leaders, what they're not doing right, until we've looked in the mirror.
Ooh, I love that call to courage for the people, right? Because it's true. Like, in order for us to even have the courage to be vulnerable in the context of that meeting with our leaders, like it requires that we have some modicum of safety inside our relationship with self, right? And that's the thing that I think is so powerful about how you're breaking this down, is like you're saying we lose authenticity because we have to defend ourselves in the world. We have to develop all these strategies for coping in the world so that we actually can stay feeling safe in the world. Right? But the reality is, if we're actually doing the work on the inside and making sure that we're safe, right, we're not going to have to cope in all of these types of ways that create all of these conflicts and all of these roadblocks, right, to being able to have the level of impact that we're trying to have in the world.
You got it.
Yeah.
It's that difference between safety and security. And no one can give anybody security. Safety is an external, what's going on in your environment, and that's on positional leaders to create a safe environment. But they can't possibly create a secure environment. Security has to come from within. And what you're talking about is when I'm feeling secure from within, I create safety around me, and I can't really create safety around me until I'm committed to creating security within me. I got to take ownership for that. And a lot of us are acting out of old beliefs that I have to operate in a certain way in order to survive, that helped me survive as a kid, but now have overused their function and no longer useful. That's where self-awareness is so foundational to all this work. You both understand that.
You're speaking our language. You have no idea. That's why we take the mindset approach to leadership coaching and leadership development, right? Is because we don't even know how you really impact a leader or help the leader impact their people unless you help them understand. It starts with the self, and it starts with unpacking and unraveling, as you called it, right? All of those conditioned beliefs that are running interference on the leader's sense of security. Unless you're going through the beliefs work, right? It's like, it's very hard to get a leader to actually be able to stand at the front of the room and create those safe conditions for their people.
See, you intrigue me so much. I would love to get each of you to tell me what your story is. Now, this is about me, I know today, but if you were to tell me your story, it would be a story that would have guided you to the kind of wisdom that you have and that enables you to do this kind of work. And it all happened by going through, I would suggest, probably facing some dark sides of yourself, some shadow
hero's
aspects.
Journey, baby. Yeah, that's really at the epicenter of our process because, that's why it's a purpose-driven mission that we're on. It's that we experientially understand everything that we're calling on people to try to come to the table and embrace, right? That was the pain that awakened us to our highest potential, like we said at the start of this meeting. We'll have to have you back for part 2. I know, to share further aspects of our hero's journey. But before we let you go, David, we have to pull out the big guns and ask you our favorite question of them all, if that's okay. What would you like the legacy of all this fabulous work around authenticity and leadership to be?
Well, first of all, I don't think legacy is what we leave behind. I think legacy is the difference we make today. So what I want to do is that I want to plant a seed today, right here, right now, because that's all I have in life, is what's in this moment, right now, in this conversation. And what I want to leave people is an awareness that when they can connect with their authentic self, that is where their greatest difference in the world will be. When they bring their gifts and their passion and their purpose more fully to the world needs and wants that authentic self to come fully forward, to let that voice come forward fully. That's what I want to leave today in this conversation, is the awareness that that's possible more fully.
Ooh.
Full circle moment.
I love that. Thank you, David, so much. And for
I will come back on your show anytime. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation.
We did as well. And for folks out there, you can obviously check out David. You can follow him on LinkedIn. We dropped his LinkedIn in the podcast notes. Also head on over to davidirvine.com and you can find his book, The Other Everest, Navigating the Pathway to Authentic Leadership there. David, is there anywhere else you want folks to find you?
Well, the best thing is just go to my website. We've got ongoing self-awareness programs. We've got monthly peer mentoring programs where we get people in small groups and work together. We've got annual, twice a year, we do a 3-day academies, leadership academies, authentic, to connect you with your authentic self. You want to go deeper with this material. If you connect with it, by all means, best place to find me is on my website, and all of our programs are on there. Thank you, folks.
Awesome. Thank you. And then for us, obviously, please hit subscribe to the Leadership Launchpad Project wherever you're listening to it, and share it with any folks in your life. And then also for us, for any leadership development, DEI, psych safety, feedback, conflict management, and more, head on over to elitehighperformance.com for all of that. Susan, is there anything you want to leave the folks with today?
I just love the full circle moment there at the end. We started off talking about full engagement, right? And full alignment. And that's exactly where David dropped the mic today. It's all about living your legacy by being fully present and fully engaged in the moment. And this moment, folks, is when the world needs authentic leaders more than ever. So I hope these seeds come to sow. And when they do, please come find David or Rob or myself, because we would love to help you unpack your hero's journey.
I love it. And for me, I want to leave folks with this. The journey to authenticity requires first the desire to go on it. And there's a moment on that journey where everything that you think about yourself will need to die so you can be reborn. And that moment is terrifying. But if you have the desire and you can step through that moment, everything changes. And so, with that, David, thank
Rob,
you so much.
Can I add one thing to that? I just gotta have the last word here. You know, authenticity is a lot like beauty. It's really hard to describe, but you know when you're in the presence of it. And today I was in the presence of beauty, truth, and love. So it was a true honor to spend this time with you. Thank you.
Well, you're the first person to call me beautiful, so I'll take that. No, it was a pleasure, David. Everyone, thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this one as much as I did. And David, we're going to have you back on because there's so much depth to keep going. And everyone,
anytime. I'll join you anytime. Take care. Keep up your good work, you two.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for listening. We'll see you all next week.
Bye, everyone.